Hello Cave Dwellers, no tweed jacket today because it's dirty work. We've got the Arcadia system up into the cave, and let me tell you, that was no easy feat. I was somewhat helped by Richard, who unfortunately has fractured his hand, so get well soon Richard. But he did help to guide me here across the car park with this machine. We have taken the monitor out, we haven't got the system in there, so it's as light as we can possibly make it. But it was a struggle to get it up at the top of the mill, all the way up here. Especially getting around corners, because it's quite a, while it's not tall, and we normally worry about the height of these machines when we try and get them up the stairwell, it was the girth of it, the pivoting it around corners that became the problem.
Ooh, my foot. Ow, I felt that.
And I needed a rest at the end of it, but we've got it up here and it's ready. I'm up against it because Hoffman is coming to visit on the 14th, so not long now, and I really want to show him his game that he ported over to the ROM card that I teased you with, showed you a little clip of in the last episode, and we will, by the end of today, get to demonstrate that and play it, and I want it ready for when he comes to visit. So, lots to do to make a complete Arcadia Super Select system in its British form, which was distributed by Electrocoin. My goal is to clean it up, make it good, make it playable, but also to keep some of the patina on this one because it's not too badly damaged. It doesn't warrant ripping the artwork off and replacing it. So if there's a few dings and scrapes here and there, I'm okay with that. I want it to look like it's had a life at the back of a social club or a pub, which is exactly where it was designed to be. So let's get cleaning. I've shown you the cabinet because you only got a glimpse of it in the last episode. Let's get some closer looks at it. I've taken out the bezel, I've taken off the control panel, so we really have just got the shell here. It needs a good clean, obviously. More worryingly, it needs a bit of clamping and gluing. There are a few gaps, a few splits that we just need to sort out here. So once it's clean, I want to get it tonight. I want to get it clamped and come in the morning for that all set and ready to go. You can see the speakers down here, which are positioned just above the control panel. This was by design, so that in a club or a pub setting, it wouldn't be blaring music out at ear level. It was just discreetly, hopefully, playing the music and the sound effects in that wonderful separated stereo sound way that only the Amiga can do. At waist level, so that it was just you and the machine that could hear it and it wasn't disturbing Doreen at the pub with her, at the bar with the G&T next to you, or whoever it was. The speakers you can see are a bit dirty, we need to give them a clean, but hopefully they should work fine. There is the JAMMA connector there, and here's the play counter, and it's telling me it's had 111,811 plays, which is an awful lot of rounds of leaderboard golf. And then we have made one modification already to this. There was, at the bottom here, a piece of wood just held in with dowel, just compartmentalising this section, and this is where the money box would have gone, which of course we don't need anymore because we'll be on free play. So we just snipped the dowels and took that bit of wood out because when we offered up the Super Select system to the cabinet, there was no way that it was going to fit in here. The original American cabinet was a much bigger space. So we've had to make a bit more space in here, and it now does nestle in there beautifully. So I'm looking forward to showing you how that all fits together and making sure that we can still easily get to the cards to slot them out should we ever make some more or download some of the rarer ones and flash some new ROMs. We want to be able to put new cards in there. I think we will discover a lot more about this machine as we get more familiar with it, as we clean it and work our way around it. So let's get the gloves on. I've got my bucket of soapy warm water, and let's have a cleaning montage. It's been a while. Let's clean an arcade. You filthy Amiga. When I was a kid, the insides of an arcade machine were such a mystery. It was this weird and wonderful machine that seemed to be able to deliver anything. And now I find myself deep inside one, scrubbing decades of dirt off of one. They're not quite as glamorous, but we'll get it there. We'll make it feel special by the end of this.
And before we do, we might be needing the services of PCBWay.com in this series because their selection of services for PCB design and manufacture, 3D printing, CNC work and lots more besides means they are the ideal partner for retro electronics enthusiasts. Check out the shared projects page on PCBWay.com for easy to order add-ons and upgrades for your favourite vintage computers, and join me in thanking PCBWay.com for supporting projects such as this one.
I think it's actually dustier from being in the workshop than when it arrived. There'll be lots happening with the workshop in the coming months, certainly in the start of the next year, because we've managed to rent the rest of the space over there. So we'll do a dedicated episode on it and what we're going to do in there. For example, the new inventory room, a dedicated electronics workshop. So there'll be lots of filming and lots going on in there with our new collective setup, and there'll be lots on that as well to talk about in the new year as we work more and more together as a collective, and in fact rebrand. Yeah, the channel will be changing to encompass Arcade Archive, The Cave, which will keep its identity, don't worry, the cave's not going anywhere, I'm not going anywhere, and Heba as well, who are making all those wonderful retro products with us. So lots to discuss. Anyway, focus, Neil. Let's get this arcade cabinet nice and clean. With every brush, I can hear this thing creaking. It definitely needs that that clamping and that glue to bring it back together. It shouldn't be wobbling and creaking that much, even in this disassembled state. The sooner we can do that, the better.
Ah, is this exciting? Glue. Getting glue.
We're getting glue. From the garage.
Workshop, Nick.
Workshop, the pump house. So Richard and I set about gluing together a split at the top of the cabinet here. That looks quite nasty. And we also glued the sides where over the years, through use, through moving it from place to place, through people like me humping it up the stairs and bashing it around to get it up here, the joins have weakened. It looks a bit messy what we're doing here, but we're just trying to get as much glue down into the joins there as possible. And then we'll give it a wipe at the end before clamping it and letting it dry overnight. The top of the cabinet's looking pretty good there the next morning. That's all nice and glued together and solid. And then I repeated this process at the rear of the cabinet a little bit lower down where it was still creaking and where I could still see daylight through some of the joins. Meanwhile, Dan had arrived and he was bringing some Christmas spirit to the cave. Do you love Christmas, Dan?
Yeah, I love Christmas.
And Holly was hard at work too, checking over the CRT that arrived in the cabinet. The CRT Tester 4000 has recently been upgraded with a signal generator, which she's very proud of. Well done, Holly. And she'll use it to gently bring up the monitor and check that it's suitable for our Arcadia system.
Right. Voltage 120-ish, 127 to be exact. Okay, we haven't engaged, so we'll go through the amps. Power up. Let's try and drive the tube. It's not enough to pull through. I have a dead bulb, unfortunately. But it doesn't matter, there's still enough current there. Right, we do not have a dead short by the looks of it. It looks good. Let's give it real power. Ta-da! Little bit of purity over here. Not so bad on the bottom. I will adjust that. Again here, and here. Okay, you probably won't see it on film right now, but I can see some flicker developing. That is probably C37, which is driving the horizontal coil. Just sitting here, got a bit of flicker. What we'll do is we'll let it power on for about an hour or so, see how it goes. That is looking pretty darn good though.
If Holly's happy, then I'm happy. The image seems good and there's no burning on that screen at all. And after about an hour, the flickering settled down. But if it returns, we will pop out that C37, which Holly's identified as a culprit. Holly then discharged the CRT and it was ready to come up to the cave. Meanwhile, Dan and I are looking over the control panel. My goal here is to keep the patina of the cabinet while protecting it from further damage. I want to freeze it in time, and I want it to be attractive enough for people to want to play it without thinking it's too grubby to touch. 4 additional buttons were added to this machine at some point, and there's wear and tear around those buttons. You can see where it's kind of worn down around those. It's a bit shinier. So I'm going to give the control panel a scrub, and I've asked Dan to come up with a hard wearing clear vinyl wrap to protect the panel moving forward. But first I need to disconnect all of those switches and the joysticks. We also need to fill in those extra button holes, as we only need 2 buttons per player. So Rich here is measuring up the holes, and then he disappears off to the 3D print room to do his magic while I clean up the control panel. Dan narrowed the vinyl wrap samples down to a couple, and eventually we all agreed on a slightly textured laminate.
Feels nice as well.
Yeah, it's quite tough this, even though it's vinyl, so you could still catch that with a fingernail,
Right.
but it's pretty tough.
And worst case scenario, if you wanted to take it off, would it take the original up with it?
No,
It would be
just
okay.
warm it up and it will just peel off.
Okay.
Yeah, that's already stuck pretty well.
Yes.
Right, that's the plan then.
That's the plan.
He's applying it wet here, which allows us to position it and move the vinyl around. And then he's pushing out the moisture and the air bubbles. Now it's going to take a few days to fully settle, and he assures me that while it will look a little bit white until it's fully settled, by the end of the episode that should all be nice and clear. He then cuts out the holes for the joysticks at the buttons and the bolts that will secure the joysticks in place. Even before all the air bubbles have vanished, I'm really pleased with this result. It's both protected the control panel and it gives it a cleaner, more even finish to the artwork. I can't even see the shiny bits around the old buttons anymore. Next, I'm bringing more of the Arcadia up the stairs for installation. And the cave is getting even more Christmassy. Look at that lovely tree. Nice work, Dan. Let's get the joystick and buttons in. Look, I found the black gloves. I'm instantly cooler. At least 30% cooler than the purple gloves. Right, the protective cover's been on here for about a day now since Dan did this. Any white patches that you spot is just moisture that's still behind there, and he says in the coming days that will disappear. So don't worry about that too much. I'm really happy with the protective cover that we've got on there. Now, because additional buttons were cut, holes were cut and buttons were put into this control panel, we've got the 2 original holes because it was 2 buttons per player, nice and smooth and round and lovely. And then the extra 4 holes are a little bit chewed. They're not quite the exact same size. You can see the air bubbles are popping up around that. Again, we'll be able to push those out in time. But I want to hide the sins of the chewed buttons, and Richard has very kindly made a whole stack of blanking plates which are made to measure with this chewed hole. So we'll be able to get them to fit in, and if they don't quite fit, we're going to warm up the backs of them so that these legs here, these just kind of melt a little bit and it will secure it into place. So let's do that now with a hot air gun. Now, of course, back in the day when this machine might have been hammered day to day, this probably wouldn't have been quite robust enough. Someone would have picked them out. I would have picked them out if I was the kid playing on the machine. But in our museum, I think it's perfectly fine. and easily replaceable. There's also definitely a bigger gap between these buttons than these buttons, so I'm not sure. I don't think a template was used when this was cut originally. It's yeah, not the most even and consistent, but there we go, they're all blanked. And I'm gonna go and find some blue buttons now, because the original Arcadia had, I think, red and blue buttons over here, so we want to mimic that. There are stories out there of people who have perhaps played a Super Select system. Maybe it was just a hacked Amiga in an arcade cabinet. But I'm hearing more and more stories of people who did play them, but nobody that saw the Super Select system over here and the choice of games. It's always Xenon for some reason. Let's get this back together then, and the joysticks need a bit of a clean, but they feel superb. I'm a big fan of a stick with a very short throw. That's personal preference. I know we're all different. Holly, for example, suggested replacing all the micro switches with less clicky ones in the cabinet. She loves a leaf switch. But I really like the feedback of hearing a clicky switch when I'm playing games. That's just my preference. There's no right or wrong way, just so long as it doesn't detract you from the ability to play the game. With those cleaned, I then also sandpaper the connectors just to clean them up a little bit, and the joysticks should be good to go. That's much better. You may have noticed as I do this, I'm trying to talk to you as much as possible, or a little bit more than I normally do or have been doing recently in these videos, because someone made a really valuable comment, and thank you for pointing this out. They said that in my more recent videos, I tend to show you a thing and the thing has been done and I've been looking back on it and recapping, if you like, which doesn't quite feel like I'm in the moment with you or taking you along for the journey, which is what we've always done with the Trash to Treasure series, is you come along on the journey with me. And I thought that's a fair comment, and I've kind of slipped into that habit because there's just so much going on, so many people involved, and actually it's nice to just have the chance to talk to you while I'm doing this and for you to explore and discover the good things and the mistakes as they happen as we go along. So I'm going to try and do it a bit more for you, if you don't mind. Ah, the spring has gone in this button. There had to be a catch somewhere. What's going on here? I can't even see a spring in that button. My button is missing a spring. If we just pop the button out itself, there's no spring in there. How was this being used without a spring in the button? Let me go and find one. I got one. Right, let's put that in the button and fix this. Surprised it took me that long to notice. In you get. Down there. There we go. Right, our button springs back now. Much better. Should double check the others. Springy, 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 springy. Clicky. 2 thumbs up. I need some new gloves. Let's see what Richard's up to now, and he's creating a JAMMA edge connector for the Arcadia, as the cabinet was converted to JAMMA at some point. So this will make it simple to connect up to the existing wiring loom.
So here I'm modifying the original Arcadia loom, which plugged in individual connectors into the various parts of the system, power and the monitor and the controls, into a JAMMA connector that we can actually use in the new Arcadia machine, because that's actually all been wired up for a JAMMA harness. So we'll be able to connect the video from the adapter board that plugs into the Arcadia, the Amiga 500, and actually rewire that all into JAMMA, so then we can just easily connect everything via JAMMA to the main harness in the cabinet, and then that will make all the connections for us. So it'll also make it easier if you want to be able to separate the whole system very quickly, just be able to pull the 2 parts apart from the JAMMA positive and male and female side, which will make it a bit easier to service in the future. So I'm just working through my way through all of these connections, and that's all the power connections. We don't need to put every one of the ones on because not all of the connections are needed, but we do need to put the video on now. So we've just put the video ground on, and video red is number 12 on this side. So I will take my red connection, solder that onto number 12. There we go, add a bit of solder, pop it in place. And what I'm going to do when all this is wired up is actually put this little connector into a plastic, 3D printed plastic housing, so I can neatly tidy all of these cables together, tie wrap them around, so then we'll end up having 2 looms that we can just push together, which is really nice.
Right, audio boards. Richard's come down to look at this, and we were just going to touch this wire back on because this goes out to the phono, which goes to the back of the Amiga into the amp. You've got a choice of mono or stereo there, and then a connector here sends it out to the what's it called, the Arcadia interface board, which then we're connecting that to JAMMA.
Board, yeah.
This is a Rev 3 board, as you can see here. So this is what came on ours. But Dave, when he sold us the cabinet, kindly also sent us this. Thank you, Dave. That's Dave Rowland. This is a Rev 7 board. So they obviously made a few boards along the way. Most noticeable difference to me is that it's got phono connectors. So very easy to just disconnect from the Amiga there. Same connector out to the interface board. Anything else, Richard, that you can spot?
No, I think the only thing it doesn't look like, it still has the mono to stereo. That's all right then. So we can still do that, but yeah, we can. Yeah, it looks good.
Well,
so I think we should use that one. See
if it works,
yeah.
we'll use that. If not, we'll fall back to the original one. And with that sorted, we can put it all together for our first complete system test, just once Richard's got his head around the unorthodox wiring scheme.
So you in your right mind, would you make plus 5 volts black?
No.
Would you make ground pink?
No.
No. Okay, and minus 5 volts purple and 12 volts orange. Okay, 12 volts orange, that actually makes sense. Why is that black?
And as we slide the heart of the Arcadia system in there, you can see how nicely it fits. The UK model had a slightly different chassis to fit into this smaller cabinet originally, but we've made our cabinet work with this one, and it's still nice and accessible from the front door. There are no fewer than 4 locks on this machine, which, it has an Amiga in it. You need all of that security to stop people smashing it open to steal the Amiga, of course. We did then face some odd behaviour with our control panel, with some of the buttons not registering. And even odder, I actually got something right.
Yeah, Neil's right, because we've been debugging this switch not working, and Neil said ages ago, probably the ground, and we were beeping it and buzzing it. It's the ground.
Ground.
Neil's right, that doesn't work, that one. Go to this ground. Left works. Sorry, Neil.
It happens sometimes, and I have to make the most of these moments. Now, with that wired up, there was one more thing I wanted to do, and that was on the glass bezel. So, you know I said I wanted to keep the patina, and I don't mind a slightly rough look. Well, this in some areas is just completely devoid of paint. At the top of the screen there's just no red paint at all, and you can see through it a little bit too much for my liking. So I took the chance to get some glass paints to colour match, and to first of all paint in all the blacks so you couldn't see through it too much, and then to touch up some of the reds to make it look a little bit nicer. But then once I'd done that, I also rubbed it back a bit to give it a rough finish again, to keep it all in keeping with the rest of the cabinet and to keep that weathered, slightly well-used look, because if I tried to make it look like new, it just would look completely out of place with the rest of the cabinet. And I'm actually really pleased with that result. I put a little card with some information about the restoration in there as well, and I think that looks wonderful. So why, you might be asking, if everything is going so well, am I on my knees with the guts spewing out of the cabinet? Well, we had a bit of an issue. On Friday, we put this all back together. You saw Richard and I putting the control panel, and at this point, when we put it back together and tested it, you can see there are things on the screen. You can see there are games running. We dialed in the monitor again just to make sure it looked as good as possible, and everything was great. Soak tested it all day on Friday, and then I thought, well, let's put it into service on Saturday on the public session and see how people get on with it. Lasted about an hour. Now, I wasn't here, so I checked back on the CCTV. An hour into the session, there's no drama, there's no smoke. You can just about see from this angle that there's something on the screen. It was playing darts at the time, and then it just switches off. I came in on Monday to check in on this, and I found this very unhappy looking fuse in the power supply and a very, very dead Rev3 NTSC Amiga 500, a rare piece of kit in its own right. So it seems like on closer inspection, the power supply has gone pop, and took that down with Richard to swap it out with another known good power supply, which we've put in now. And we've swapped it out, the Amiga, until we can actually figure out what's wrong with that Amiga, because it's just outputting a black screen. It's giving us nothing at the moment. So that's going to need some attention, and we will give it the attention because we want this to be as original as possible. But I put a Rev 5 Amiga in here, and we found that a Rev 5 Amiga with, I've got a later Agnes in here, which does both PAL or NTSC, although the crystal will be slightly different. Regardless of that, so long as we have Kickstart 1.2 in this Amiga, it boots with the Arcadia system and everything seems to be working as normal at the right speed. Everything seems fine, which is a brilliant fact to find out for future maintenance of this machine, because we're not dependent on an old Rev 3 NTSC only Amiga to keep this thing running. We can use any Amiga board with a 1.2 Kickstart ROM in, by the looks of things, and I will continue testing with this. So that's why everything's spewing its guts out. We had a bit of a hiccup, but we're back on top of it now, and we're going to get it all back together again, and I can finally show you it in action. And after that last minute bit of drama, here it finally is. I'll switch it on for you. It has, of course, been on. I've been testing it, so this isn't a big switch on moment. We've switched it on many times in testing, and finally it's happy. So here it is. It boots up with the template control program. We saw the games in the last episode, so go back and check that if you want to see what it's all about. But there is one extra game in here. Take a look at this. This card here used to be air hockey. Not the most exciting game in the world, but it is now stacked with ROMs. It is completely full, all 16 ROMs in there. I think that's a full meg on that card. And it contains Cecconoid, which is a game by Hoffman. So he's taken a floppy disk based Amiga game and he's hacked it to make it work on a ROM card. Here he is now. I had a chat with him about everything that was involved, the hacking, the security, everything that was needed to take a regular Amiga game and make it work on this thing. And while he's talking, we'll see some of that incredible game.
It started on the Thursday, I think, when I saw a little post on social media from Neil, it kind of, in our Discord, we've got a little TTE Discord where we talk about cracking and coding and all this kind of stuff. And very quickly, it caused a bit of a buzz in there. Although it's an Amiga 500, the sideboard that plugs into it provides obviously a game ROM and a BIOS ROM. Now that's kind of like the major difference when you're comparing it to anything else that runs on the Amiga, because anything else runs in RAM, which is random access memory. So you can change that and you'd load it off a floppy disk. So you've got 880K of floppy disk over there. So, you know, that's kind of the two major differences between the two systems. So the first thing that we actually had to crack was one of the ROMs on the board has got its bit order shuffled. So if you just read the ROM as normal, it's not, none of the data is in the right order. So I had to create a system where I could descramble that, modify the code or modify the data, and it just change a little something just to get the process kind of up and running. That's kind of the first step. Once you're able to just modify an existing game ROM and then get it to verify. So we just put TTE rules as the game name. It was then the next step of producing kind of just a bare bones ROM with just a tiny piece of code, like a hello world effectively. So yeah, so once that first shell effectively was built, with just a tiny piece of code that just put a load of random colors on the screen, then I knew I had something that I could build and then run my own code on it. So that's when things do start to get a little tricky. Cecconoid, for example, uses 512k of chip RAM, 512k of fast RAM or slow RAM on a 500. So I'm already using 1 meg of RAM, but the Arcadia's only got 512k. So, but it has 1 meg of ROM. So anything like code and physical data, anything that doesn't use the custom chips can all sit on the ROM. But that very quickly runs out because a lot of the data has to remain uncompressed for it to be useful in the ROM. So the ROM ends up being this power struggle between like, how much RAM have I got? How can I shrink my RAM usage? And how much ROM have I got? How can I like move stuff into there and use it straight from there, or so this whole kind of power struggle between where in memory stuff's going to actually go. There were certain things about the Arcadia that you kind of had to adhere to a point. So obviously it has credits. So we support the fact that you can put money in and your credits will go up. But the amount of RAM I was using meant that as soon as the game started, everything that the Arcadia knows about credits is basically wiped out. So we have to kind of back up what credits you've already put in. And then it kind of traps you in Cecconoid until you run out of credits, and then just leave the game alone for a bit. So it's not the most seamless, but we're trying to find like the best compromise within a short space of time to get it working nicely. And the truth of the matter is, it'll probably be on free play the whole time anyway. I think it took 4 days in total. It was really fun to do. Because it's that perfect mix of, there's some investigation, kind of some kind of copy protection, a bit of cracking, a bit of disassembly. And then once that part had been done quite quickly, it's like, well, how do we cram a game in very quickly? So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So there it is, the first brand new Arcadia Super Select System game in 30 or so years. He actually did it, the madman. And it plays brilliantly. And yes, we've got all the other games on here to play, and we can download some of the others that were released at the time, and we can flash them and get them to work in a similar way. But for me, Cecconoid really is the cherry on the top of this whole adventure. An adventure which involved importing the guts of this system from Canada over a period of months, getting it to work, finding a cabinet. Thank you again to Dave, who very fortunately had this cabinet and was willing to sell it so that we could reunite the system and create an all singing, all dancing Arcadia Super Select system. I'm laughing at myself as I say all singing and dancing, as singing and dancing as this system can be, because we're not fools. It's not the most incredible arcade in the world. But with Cecconoid, with that cherry on the top, it's certainly something that I'm going to spend a lot of time playing and directing people to check out, to see the potential of the system. If you'd played that in 1987, and there really is no reason why you couldn't have been able to play it, other than perhaps decades of accumulated knowledge. But technically, from the hardware point of view, that game could have been in the arcades in 1987, and I think it would have stood up against any other game in there. And if you're wondering what happened to Arcadia, well, while the arcade project was far from successful, they did salvage something in the publishing of the game. Some of the games which appeared in the arcade. So for example, Xenon, Sidewinder and Blaster Ball are in this Volume 1 awesome arcade action pack. And you can see the Arcadia logo down there. This one from the US, so it's got distributed by Electronic Arts, but we also had games released in the UK with the Arcadia label on there. But I think it's fair to conclude that the whole Arcadia project was a flop for Mastertronic. And it is all ready now for Hoffman's arrival on Saturday. And if you follow me on social media or Patreon or a future video, I'll get pictures and videos of him playing it and a little bit of feedback. I hope it lasts the day. It really should now after everything we've put into it. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. If you'd like to support projects like this and everything that we do here at the Retro Collective, head to patreon.com/RMC Retro, where you can become an official cave dweller, and as we go into the new year, a supporter of the Retro Collective, as we do a little bit of shuffling with our branding. And subscribe if you haven't already done so. Check out Heber's shop, where Richard sells his great products, and check out the Cave Store, where you can buy books and all sorts of other great stuff from the museum shop here. I think that's everything. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, everyone. Oh, and do book a ticket to come and play it sometime. Take care. Bye-bye.